Carmel. Okay, wonderful. So today I am so pleased to welcome Carmel Tanaka as our featured speaker. Many of you will know her from her leadership work here in Victoria with Hillel. And she's also a big macher in Vancouver as the founder of one of Canada's only Jewish, queer, and trans organizations. It's called JQT. Actually, I'm not saying there is JQT. JQT, but it stands for Jewish, Queer, and Trans Vancouver. And it's an incredible arts, cultural, and educational nonprofit organization that's dedicated to creating connections and seeking spaces to celebrate the intersectional identities of Jews of all ages, sexual orientations, gender, and sex identities. And she'll tell you more about that work, but it's very, very groundbreaking and exciting work. She's also founded Genocide Prevention BC, which is a cross-cultural collective of BC representatives who are preventing genocide and crimes against humanity through community education and engagement. And then the other thing that I know she's done is she's created these amazing cross-cultural walking tours in Vancouver where she takes volunteers take people on walking tours around the downtown East Side neighborhoods. And that's to build awareness of the contributions of immigrant communities throughout history. And it's a very exciting program. So we're very, very honored to have her here. She's going to tell us her story. And I think as a queer Jew of color, she is perfectly positioned to lead us in thinking about bridging cultures and peoples and values and all of our differences. So I would like you to join me in welcoming Carmel Tanaka. And oh, this is how we do our applause on Zoom.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Hello, everyone. I see a lot of familiar names, but I can't see all of you because I see my big face here, but you're all super tiny. I am just so happy to be back. I'm going to be sharing my screen. Give me a second to do that. I'm going to make sure that this is here and that this is sound. Yes, great, wonderful. Just want to make sure that everyone can see. Can you all see the title page of my presentation? Yeah. Okay, wonderful. Great, thank you. So, as you know, my name is Carmel Tanaka. Many thanks to Kolot Mayim for inviting me to present in your speaker series, Celebrating Diversity in Jewish Life. I'm calling in from Vancouver on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples, and I'm wishing you a very happy Hanukkah, so Chag Sameach. Today is the last day, and it's very exciting times at JQT. Some of you may remember me for my time as the former Halal director at the University of Victoria. I spent an incredible 2 years in your lovely city, and I miss it immensely, so shout out to the island. And since leaving the island, I started a bunch of projects. Some of you are Facebook friends and probably saw what I've been up to. But for those of you who are not familiar, I'll be walking you through some of the stuff that I've been doing to bring you up to speed. Very happy to report during the panini, which is what I refer to as the pandemic, I became self-employed as a community engagement professional, and literally everything I do is deeply personal. So as my title for this presentation suggests, I identify as a queer, neurodivergent Jewpanese woman of color, all of which I came out to embrace later in life, actually after my time in Victoria. And I'm also a millennial. So I'd like to begin first by introducing you to my family. On the left is my Ima, Dalia Gottlieb. She's a first-generation Ashkenazi Jewish Israeli, born in Haifa. And on the right is my dad, Mineo Tanaka. He's a Sansei, third-generation Japanese Canadian. So that makes me a Yonsei, someone who's fourth generation. And these lovely pictures are circa 1975, which I'm sure a bunch of you are familiar with and remember quite fondly. This photograph is of my Jewish and Japanese Canadian grandparents meeting for the very first time. This is also in the 70s and before I was born, and you can tell from the sepia colors. I eventually came along in the late 80s in 1987, and I was a bit of a chonky baby, a little on the fat side, as you can see. And I was lucky enough to meet 3 of my 4 grandparents. Unfortunately, my Bachan, my Japanese grandmother, passed away before I was born. And the rest of them I lost pretty young, and definitely at an age where I was not nearly old enough to have the opportunity to ask them the questions that I so would desperately want to ask them now, particularly what they went through. I'm referring to the Japanese Canadian internment and the Holocaust, respectively. And that being said, you know, the traumas have greatly impacted my family, not just the immediate family, but also the family at large, and has informed the social justice work that I do today. So that's my Dichan on the left holding me. Unfortunately, he passed away soon after that. Photo was taken, and then my grandparents, my Safta, my Saba are on the right-hand side. And yeah, my Hebrew back then wasn't nearly as good as it is now. So I didn't really have the opportunity to do anything other than play Gin Remy and a bunch of cards. And by this point, Saba was blind. So it was, yeah, I mean, my grandparents had my parents pretty late in life, given the war and everything. And then my parents were in their closer to the 40s, if not in their mid 40s when they had me. So there's quite a generational gap. And so I got to give it to my folks that they had a really young kid later in life, which meant, you know, my grandparents are turn of the century in many ways. And so when I think about what I do today, I think about my parents and the years, the decades that they had to catch up in terms of, you know, being able to accept that they have a queer mixed child. So there's a lot to unpack there. Fast forward a bunch of years, 34 years, here I am with my folks celebrating my dad's 75th birthday, which was just last year. He'll be 76 on December 15th, which is really exciting. And on this table, there's a lot of action happening. Aside from the whipped cream and the strawberries, there's my mom's Jewish coffee cake. There's dorayaki Japanese manju pancakes, genmai-cha tea, and Hanukkah candles. And I think this is the 6th night of Hanukkah in this picture. And to me, this is a completely normal table. And perhaps some of the tables in Victoria's Jewish community also have a melding of traditions on their tables as well. Hey. Both of my parents are fantastic cooks, and apparently this did pass down to me as well. As some of you may remember, coming to Hillel House while I was there, I would cook also hot lunches on Tuesdays and then a monthly Shabbos. And I was encouraged by a friend of mine in Los Angeles who at the time was working for B'chol Hashon, whose mission is to strengthen Jewish identity by raising awareness about ethnic, racial, and cultural diversity of Jewish identity and experience. And they also were privy to my cooking back in the day when we lived in Tel Aviv as students. I would feed him. His name is Andrew. He recently got married, now lives in California. And he said, can you please just do a recipe for one of the Rosh Hashanah specials? And so typically in our family, we do salmon teriyaki. You're supposed to do salmon for the new year, or at least fish for the new year. But I wanted to give it a little bit of a facelift, and I created this miso maple orange zested trout, and it's our new holiday table fave. but I also just made it 2 nights ago. So I mean, like, it doesn't have to be the new year in order to enjoy that. And this was the year 2019, and it sparked really the beginning of connecting with other Jewpanese people and a slew of fusion Jewish recipes. One of the Jewpanese people I connected with is none other than Kristen Eriko Posner of Nourish Co., who would eventually become my friend and co-founder of a monthly Jewpanese Zoom call with Jewpanese people and their families from all over the world. And we meet monthly on the second Sunday of the month. And it turns out the month of May is both Jewish Heritage Month as well as Asian Heritage Month. So it's really our month. And with permission, I stole Kristen's idea to add pureed kabocha squash into the challah dough and put it into a challah recipe. And I was taught by the one and only Robbie McConnell, former editor of the Montreal Gazette, who was not Jewish, but married to a lovely person who is tuning in here today, Isa Millman, a dear friend of mine. I absolutely love you and miss you. And yeah, I used Robbie's challah recipe and I incorporated the kabocha squash, and I now call it the kabo challah. And this recipe, let me tell you, it started to spread like wildfire. I heard things like, oh my God, you got featured in Haggadah.com. And I really didn't know what that meant, but I guess that meant you made it in the Jewish cooking world if you were featured there. And then I got featured in the Miso Soup for the Soul in the Gepo Bulletin, which is the Japanese Canadian equivalent of the Jewish Independent here in Vancouver. So definitely this was going around, and it turns out the editor of this magazine is also has a Jewpanese family. And so we were definitely growing the Jewpanese clan. I was invited to workshops. This was with Or Shalom, one of the local synagogues in Vancouver. Yes, always bringing in the rainbow to be proud of being queer. And I also started to make this bread for the cross-cultural walking tours, because in many ways it's a fusion of two of my identities and two of the communities that participate in the cross-cultural walking tours, which brings together storytellers from many different communities that call the neighborhood of Strathcona home then and now. And I would offer the bread as snack time. And this particular photograph, we're in the Mongkyong School, which is part of the Wong's clan, the Benevolent Association. And so it was kind of fun to be seated in these super, super tiny tables and chairs, as if you're in class learning Cantonese back in like the 20s or whatnot, turn of the last century. And when we would take people on tour, I remember one time, this was May 2019, and a bunch of tourists from New York, a bunch of Jews, were sitting in these tables, and they were like, wow, this totally reminds me of Yiddish class back in the day in New York City. So they said even some of the books had the same photographs. And so who knows, it might have been the same publisher that would just change like what a ball or a puppy or a cat, whatever you learn the language, right, would be Yiddish versus Chinese. So that was really cute and fun. A lot more similar than you think, all of us human beings, eh? The greatest form of flattery was when another member of the Jewpanese clan, Lauren Schreiber Sasaki, took my kabo challah recipe and instead of braiding it, turned it into a pumpkin-shaped challah, and obviously infinitely more talented and looks amazing. In 2020, B'chol asked me again for a recipe. And again, it was my friend Andrew who was encouraging me. By this point, I'd become known as a food activist, which I thought was really fun. Never thought that I would become a food critic or become known at all for my cooking, but that was really, really, really fun. And I thank him for it. And this time I was asked to put something together for Shavuot. And of course, you're thinking cheese, like what can I do with cheese? And, really at the end of the day, there's really only one recipe, and it's my mom's recipe for her Jewish 3-layered cheesecake. You got the graham cracker on the bottom, you've got the dense cream cheese in the middle, and then the sour cream on top. And she got that recipe from Ruti, an American Jew who probably got it from her mom, who probably got it from her mom. So who knows how far back that goes. And it was time to tweak it. So I added matcha to the cream cheese filling. And this was during quarantine. We were stuck on the mountain at Silver Star in BC when the panini began. And yeah, so this was a family activity that kept us busy for a bit. My mom was dictating to me how to make the cheesecake as if I've never made this before. And I tasked Dad with making a stencil of the Jewish Star of David so I could decorate the tree, and I made him do it in another room so that we could have space. And this was the result. A family effort, which was very wabi-sabi, which is a Japanese term for not being perfect. And it was a sign of our collaboration in our family. And boy, was it tasty. Now, this article was accompanied with a call out to Jewpanese people announcing that there's a monthly call, and if anyone wanted to join, to contact me. And I started to get lots of inquiries from Jewpanese people saying, I thought I was the only one. And it turns out, you know, there's a lot of us. We're not as unique as we thought. And what's really great about these calls is, you know, we get to share things that we've never been able to share before, either in Jewish or Japanese communities, because we understand one another. It's like, it's amazing. Our first activity was simply just introducing ourselves using our full name. So my full name is Carmel Tanaka, and to be in the presence of a group of people who also understand the significance of each name. Your name is so important to who you are in many ways. And so we were all like, oh, so people who understand that it's Jewish, it's Hebrew, it's Japanese, and all of the cool things. And many of us, we switch our names depending on which audience we're in. So many times in Japanese community, I won't say my name is Carmel because it has an R and an L, which is absolutely impossible to say in Japanese. And so if you were to attempt, it would be Kameru or Karumeru, none of which is Carmel. So my middle name, Ayala, which is also Hebrew, the first bit, Aya, I've shortened it in order for it to be very short. It's also, Aya is a Japanese name. So I'm Aya Tanaka in Japanese spaces. Anyway, little did I know that this recipe would be shared all over the world. I mean, literally all over the world. And one day I get a photograph from my Jewish cousin in Melbourne, Australia, saying that his girlfriend just made my matcha cheesecake recipe, the photograph of that. And I absolutely love it when people are sending me their attempts to my recipes and be like, hi, what do I do now? And it's just fun to be able to share this with people. There were 2 kabo challahs from a cooking class that I gave at Or Shalom, and these are the 2 pictures. One was by a man who has a Jewpanese daughter living in Japan, and one was by a queer Jewpanese person. And speaking of queer, as I was introduced earlier, I'm the founder and executive director of JQT Vancouver, the Jewish queer and trans nonprofit in Vancouver, and it is the first in Vancouver and BC. There are a bunch of other Jewish queer groups in Canada, but we are, to my knowledge, the third to incorporate it as a nonprofit in Canada, or at least, yeah, and there's only 2 now in operation. The other one is in Winnipeg. And yeah, I mean, the US has plenty of organizations that are queer and Jewish, but here in Canada, we're a smaller population and it takes a little bit longer. And I would also venture to say we're more conservative, a little bit behind in the times. And so here we are. Our mission is to queer Jewish space and to Jewify queer space. And I believe that pictures convey more than 1,000 words. So I'm gonna play you a slideshow from our first 2 years in operation. We're now in our 4th, leading to our 5th year. But the last 2 years have been the pandemic, right? So not really much going on in person, but we've definitely had an online presence, which I will get into. But this video should give you a little brief overview of what JQT is all about. Let's see, press play. I hope you can hear this. Can you hear it? All right, so that gives you an idea what our first, oops, I'm trying to, next one. Whoop, let's try to move it manually. Yes, there we go. Yeah, so that was the first 2 years, and you can see towards the end of that, we entered the pandemic, things went virtual. And a lot of stuff has been learning as you go. You know, we were used to doing in-person events, and all of a sudden we had to become online stage managers and using software and programs that we've never used before. Also, we simply did not have enough tech equipment, and we're a volunteer organization. I don't get paid really as an executive director. I get honoraria on occasion when we are successful with donations and grants. So we really had to pull together a bunch of asks and to get more equipment like mics, another computer, and you know, I learned a lot of skills, and it was an uphill steep learning curve for sure. But yeah, before the pandemic hit, we had a lovely opportunity to queer Jewish space, and one of the ways that we do it best is by queering Jewish food in Jewish space. And here I am tabling at the Jewish Community Center in Vancouver, selling rainbow Kolot glazed with apricot jam on a busy Friday morning. And there was a reason why I chose Friday. Later that evening would be Shabbat, and I wanted to make sure that we were queering Jewish tables in Jewish households across the city. And we sold out in under 2 hours on all 40 Kolot, which was amazing. And it was a good starter money for us to continue with our programming. Another example is selling rainbow sprinkled hamantashen for Purim, which is the gayest Jewish holiday and is embraced by LGBTQ Jews worldwide as our holiday, typically in March. And we tabled again at the J to promote Purim drag story time at the Jewish Public Library, and it was again sold out. I also sell tsumami zaiku, which are fabric flowers, essentially fabric origami, to weave in my Japanese identity. Did it in rainbow colors, and together with the hamantashen, it sent a beautiful and proud message that said LGBTQ Jews and Jews of color exist. We are here, we are Jewish, we are also gay, and we're not going anywhere. And happy holidays. During the pandemic, I mean, we were all trying to figure out what to do like everybody else. And one of the projects that and collaborations that we were really excited to do before the pandemic got postponed, but eventually in time for Vancouver Pride, which is in August, JQT organized the Chosen Family Art Exhibition at the Zach Art Gallery in partnership with the gallery at the JCC, which is right in the heart of the JCC. So if you are not familiar with the venue, when you walk in, the gallery is completely open to people who are walking through the community center. There's glass paneling, so anyone who walks by, which you have to walk by in order to get to anywhere else, you would see the contents inside. And it was really an amazing opportunity to have Jewish queer and trans artists, many of whom first time displaying their work in a Jewish setting, to be able to celebrate both, you know, their Jewish and queer and trans identities. And then we heard that some people would bring in student groups and daycare groups that are also at the community center into the exhibit to take a look around, and had discussions on pronouns. And it was really beautiful because, you know, the future generations, they need to see people like them being represented so that they know it's safe, or at least safer, to be truly and fully who they are. When we were young, we did not necessarily have these role models or anyone to look up to. So to have this today is really special, and absolutely love it. Okay, JQT is also a partner organization on an amazing project called PRISM, convening of Jewish artists of color. And as you can see from this screenshot, this is my place. This is my jam. We're in partnership with No Silence on Race, Fenster Gallery, The Workshop, and DNA Works. This is a Canada/US initiative. And it's one of the few places I get to celebrate all of my identities. And I absolutely love working with the organizing team. We work really well. We're super respectful of one another, and we listen to all of our ideas. And I just can't wait. We've done 2 online sessions, and this is a screenshot from the second one. And I look forward to hopefully one day in person next year. Another project, which some of you may already know about, is the BC Jewish Queer and Trans Oral History Project. Some of you I interviewed for it. I see you. And it all began when I texted someone who works at the Jewish Museum and Archives of BC to find out if they have currently in their archives any Jewish queer trans content to work with, and only to find out that there was nothing in the archives and that I would have to create Jewish queer and trans archives for there to be content. So the purpose of this oral history project is to make the Jewish community's archives more inclusive and complete by hearing the stories of older Jewish queer and trans adults and their lived experiences in the Jewish and LGBTQ communities across BC over the decades. And this is the first project of its kind in the province. Yes, phase 1 was to conduct the interviews, and we did this in partnership with the museum. This phase has now been completed, and JQT has moved on to phase 2, which is to use the content from those interviews in the development of a public online exhibit to give voice to a marginalized community within an already marginalized community. And we have a sample of the exhibit currently on our website, which launched August 1st during Vancouver Pride Festival. And I'm really happy to report that as of last week, we were a successful recipient of a fund, a grant. And this is really great timing because we really do want to complete the website, the online exhibit, so we can include all of the interviews that we did, and because we want to celebrate you, everyone who participated in the project sooner rather than later. And you can take a look. I'll put a link in the chat so you can take a look at it in a minute. We packed a lot into this teaser, a timeline showing BC's queer and trans history dating as far back as the 1920s until today. And there's a bunch of cool infographics and video excerpts from the interviews that we did. And I have to say that pretty much hands down, this is the most incredible project I've ever been a part of. If I do say so myself, I'm very honored to be on it. And the oral history project has not only been really beneficial for me personally, but I think also for a lot of people who lived through times where it was illegal to be gay, you know, weren't welcomed in various settings, not just in the Jewish community, but anywhere and everywhere. So it was really great to be able to sit down and hear and have people reflect and share with me all their dark secrets from over the years. Now, everyone was really great, and absolutely honored that I am now the carrier and the harbor of these amazing stories, life stories. Now, the Oral History Project gave rise to gave life to two more initiatives. One is the JQT Seniors Initiative, which is a working group of Jewish, LGBTQ, and senior healthcare organizations, as well as the JQT seniors themselves. And the mission there is to raise awareness addressing senior social isolation and the fear of going back into the closet and or hiding one's religious and cultural identities upon entering long-term care. Now, I had no idea that that would become something that would come from the Oral History Project, but I'm really glad it did because we're moving mountains. When you enter long-term care, the intake process currently does not ask you whether it's Island Health or Vancouver Health or Fraser Health. They don't ask you if you identify as LGBTQ. It's up to you or whoever is doing the intake process with you, perhaps a guardian. It's on you, the onus is on you in order to share that. So we're trying to make the intake process more inclusive. We understand that there's a lot of barriers to that, but we're excited. We're going to be starting a pilot project with one of the senior homes here in Vancouver to figure out what support senior care homes need in order to facilitate this inclusion, and then figure out a template for senior care homes across the province. So that was the first one initiative to come out of the Oral History Project. The second one is now JQT is involved in diversity, equity, and inclusion work. We do in inclusion work and consultations. And most recently, we presented at Jewish Family Services Vancouver, JFS Vancouver. We presented to their staff for a training day for their LGBTQ initiative. We'll be presenting to their board in the early 2022. And yeah, we have experts as well, but also excerpts of videos from former past employees sharing their experience of Jewish organizational LGBTQ inclusion. This is from the Oral History Project. And we will also be conducting an updated needs assessment. For each of the candles of Hanukkah, we have a Hanukkah hottie joining JQT to light their Chanukia, or perhaps share another tradition and chit-chat about the wonderful things that they do in life for the duration of the candles burning. We live stream on our Facebook page every day. All of these videos have been recorded, so you can check it out on our page. Our social media handle is at JQT VAN. We are being generously supported by creating Accessible Neighborhoods, CAN BC, which is an organization that advocates for and educates about disabled people with intersecting identities. And there is a lot of intersection between queer community and being neurodivergent, and particularly in the Jewish community. I'm specifically referring to ADHD, which I belong to this group, and autism as well. And so all of our guests here have intersecting identities, and it's been really great to not only talk about being Jewish, queer, trans, but also neurodivergent at the same time and being on the spectrum. I just interviewed a lovely person named Tikva Wolf, and they are in Asheville, North Carolina. They are a cartoonist and draw cartoons about their life, essentially, about polyamory, about being ADHD, and it was a fascinating conversation, so you can definitely check that out. That was just at 9 a.m. this morning. And tonight, I'm going to be interviewing Ari Fremder, who is a JQT Dream Team member and our in-house graphic designer. And they are a Latinx, autistic, Jewish, non-binary artist and animator in the film industry here in Vancouver, originally from Zimbabwe. So definitely an interesting story there. And that'll be at 7 p.m. Very excited for that. And yes, I have so much more to share, and I thought before we enter we can enter the question and answer period at this time, but I know that a bunch of you are probably curious to know what I've been up to since leaving the island, and I'm happy to have this also be a little bit of a catch up with the community. I miss you all so much. Really did enjoy my time in Victoria, and who knows, maybe I might return in the future. But yeah, I'm so pleased to be here, and thank you for inviting me. And here's the ad lib popcorn style part of the presentation where I get to answer any and all questions. There's not a single silly question. This is, I hope, a safer space for you, a braver space. And I know that this is one of the questions that's coming up for you to ask questions about experiences, lived experiences. I'm all here for it.
Great. Oh, that was so amazing. You are such an inspiration, Carmel. Thank you so much for sharing your story.